Welcome back. In 2007, the budget for NASA, the United States government's space exploration division, is expected to amount to $17 billion. That's a lot of money. But what else does it buy? Well, $17 billion is also approximately equivalent to the cost of keeping U.S. forces in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2002. Roughly speaking, it totals the annual gross domestic product of Uzbekistan and the United Nations World Food Programme, which works to feed 90 million of the world's poorest people in 80 countries, could use NASA's yearly budget to bankroll its entire operation for 6 years. We're still joined by our guests in Amsterdam, Mark Eppener, head of the Science and Applications Division at the European Space Agency. In Boston, Farouk Elbaz, a research professor and the director of the Center for Remote Sensing at Boston University. In Colorado, Loring Werbel from Citizens for Peace in Space. He's also an author and a space expert. If I could start once again with Mr. Werbel. Do you think the world is spending too much money on space exploration? Should be spending the money elsewhere? And let's face it, it's not only the United States that's in the space exploration. You've got even developing countries which have severe developing problems pouring money into space programs now.
I think it's mostly an issue of redirection of resources and getting the most bang for the buck, as you will. You mentioned the $17 billion for NASA in the U.S. It used to be the bulk of that money was directed to deep space exploration of robotic missions and satellite development. There has been a recent trend more toward returning to the glory days of manned space missions, bases on Mars and Moon, which sound good in theory, but to me represent a bigger waste of resources, which it appears that China now is moving in that direction as well. And it seems satellite sensing would be a better use of that money. But when we talk about bang for the buck, we also have to recognize that the U.S. military spends $68 billion a year on military space, including numbers like $7 billion for the National Reconnaissance Office and $10 billion for the Missile Defense Agency. Our concern is not just the weapons in space, but that the resources controlled by the military for navigation, intelligence, communications, and sensing have been redirected since the end of the Cold War to serve first strike warfighting missions rather than serve the missions of arms control. And I think that redirection of resources is more important than simply saying we need to spend less money on space. I'm not sure that that would necessarily benefit the poor.
To interrupt you, but Dr. Elbaz's point earlier was that only a small proportion of that of the money is spent on things with military aims and objectives.
Oh, certainly not the case in the United States. The vast majority of money, again, $68 billion as emphasized by the National Space Architect, which takes several agencies into account, is spent per year on military space versus roughly, even if we include agencies outside NASA, about $25 billion in civilian space.
All right, let's bring Dr. Elbaz, the man himself, back into this point here then. How do you justify that priority?
That's okay. The expenditure in the intelligence community in space, as far as the U.S. is concerned, is vast. There is no question about it. And the U.S. would keep saying that all of this is necessary for the development of new hardware and software to be able to protect the country and so on. And nobody is objecting to that, especially since 9/11. But indeed, there is a little above board expenditure in military aspects, while the civilian space program is not getting as much attention. So in the United States, this is true. In all other countries, it is much less than that. It is very limited amount in military space programs. In the meantime, countries like India and China, they are not stupid. When they started research programs and space programs, they really wanted to develop the country further and join the economic development club. And so they realized that developments in space or in the space program in general, locally, would make sure that they have the workforce that is well trained and well knowledgeable so that they can raise the technical level of the society as a whole and in technology specifically.
All right, now that we've kind of broadened out the discussion here to talk about more of an international context, Let's bring in once again to the discussion Mr. Heppener and talk about the European Space Agency's experience. Is internationalizing space exploration programs the way forward? Does it force people to work for the common good rather than for self-interest or mutual destruction?
Definitely. I definitely think so, and I even think that in the early Apollo days there was already a quite interesting collaboration between the NASA and the Soviet Union at the time, which helped understanding people. The first flight of Gagarin was something that was celebrated all over the world, as was the first launch of Sputnik. From the European perspective, it's something that we are used to do every day because, as you know, Europe is a gathering of different countries. We all work together towards our common goals. And it is one of our clear objectives to expand that collaboration to everybody who would like to work with us in whatever area. I really like Mr. Elbaz mentioning just now India. I was there last week and we discussed on how we can cooperate. It is very clear that in India they set up a very ambitious space program with quite some significant country for a country like that, really because they see the benefits of it. And in Europe we are very happy to help with that in themes like Earth observation or disaster management, disaster recognition, medical applications. There's many good things that you can get from space, and that is basically what the European Space Agency's program is for.
Let's change gears a little bit and go over to Dr. Baz once again. Pick up a point which Mr. Werbel mentioned earlier about the changing priorities of NASA's programs and perhaps a swing back towards manned missions. What's the thinking behind, I think it's a 25% drop over 5 years in the financing and budgeting of robotic missions? Why are we going back to manned flights? What's the goal there?
Well, this is an argument that has been going on for many, many decades, and whether you insert man in the whole story or not. And indeed, it's a significant argument, and so there are people on both sides of the aisle. I definitely am siding with the importance of manned missions, because human beings kind of try to relate to other human beings, and when a human being does something, we all feel that we were with him or with her. And that's why human beings worldwide felt that they have actually reached the moon with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And why is that? Because we tend to do that in general. We tend to see ourselves with the exploration of others. And for this reason, it is very easy to support a manned space program as far as the political support is concerned, and begin bringing in money, than unmanned missions. In the meantime, indeed, the argument is, if you send unmanned missions all over the place, you have better success with less money, as far as knowledge is concerned. But as I said earlier, that the space program is not really about money alone. It's about all kinds of things that include the way human beings feel and so on. Even the Apollo people themselves, and I was one of them, we did not feel that America was going to the moon. We felt that we were satisfying the dream of mankind. We were all going, because human beings, from the very first day when they looked up in the sky and saw the moon, they wondered about it and wanted to go there or wanted to know about it. And now the Apollo program, through the Apollo program, we're going to go as human beings. All of humanity is going to go there and experience the moon.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit onto another issue. We're talking about money and funding. Mr. Werbel, there's a growing trend of privatizing space exploration. Is that a positive thing for civil society, do you think?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to bring that up on the issue of manned space flight. This is the true wild card we're facing right now. What will commercial space enterprises like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic really represent? They could show NASA and other national space agencies the way to bring human beings to space cheaper. And certainly, we would not have gotten anywhere with microelectronics or the internet without the entrepreneurialism of small companies. But what will privatization represent? Will it be corporate control eventually moving into the hands of Lockheed Martin or Boeing as companies get acquired? Or will it represent new innovation, new ways of doing things? I think right now the jury is out. Most of these companies are based in the U.S., and so it's hard to think how they might benefit developing nation.
Right. Well, I'm afraid we are running out of time, though. There's plenty more to explore, no pun intended. We'll have to thank our guests, Mark Heppener from the European Space Agency, Dr. Farouk Elbaz from Boston University, and Loring Werbel from Citizens for Peace in Space. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. For now, it's goodbye.